You go where the story leads you, and in this case, I had no idea it was going to have a dark conclusion.
My idea about a good idea is one that sticks around and sticks around and sticks around. I think the best writers are voracious readers who pick up the cadences and the feel of narration. And around the time that I turned 17 or 18, the nail fell out of the wall because there were so many rejection slips on it, so I got a bigger nail.
I just look for ideas that I really enjoy, something that I really want to live with for a while, like the story about the people under the dome.
My brother and I were both readers, and at some point along the way, I decided that I wanted to be a writer. So I started to type up stories on an old typewriter that I had, and I started to send them to magazines, and I pounded a nail into the wall, and I'd get the rejection slips back, and I would put them on that nail, and around the time that I turned 17 or 18, the nail fell out of the wall because there were so many rejection slips on it, so I got a bigger nail. And if there's any secret that I know to success, it's if you don't succeed, get a bigger nail.
Yes, there is something I want to ask you. All right. How the f*** do you write so many books so fast? I think, I've had a really good 6 months. I've written 3 chapters, and you've finished 3 books in that time.
Here's the thing, okay? There are books and there are books. The way that I work, I try to get out there and I try to get 6 pages a day. So with a book like End of Watch, and when I'm working, I work every day, 3-4 hours, and I try to get those 6 pages and I try to get them fairly clean. So if the manuscript is, let's say, 360 pages long, that's basically 2 months' work. It's concentrated, but but that's assuming that it goes well.
And you do hit 6 pages a day?
I usually do.
You don't ever have a day where you sit down there and it's like constipation and you write a sentence and you hate the sentence and you check your email and you wonder if you had any talent after all and maybe you should have been a plumber. Don't you have days like that?
No, I mean, there's real life. You know, I can be working away and something comes up, and you have to basically get up and you have to go to see the doctor, or you have to take somebody a care package, or you have to go to the post office, because whatever. But mostly I try to get the 6 pages in, although entropy tries to intervene.
You go where the story leads you, and in this case, I had no idea it was going to have a dark conclusion. You know, you were mentioning before we got going Salem's Lot, and when I started that story, I thought to myself, well, this will be the opposite of Dracula, where the good guys win. In this book, the good guys are going to lose, and everybody's going to become a vampire at the end of the book. And that didn't happen, because you go where the book leads you, and this one just led me into a very dark place. I didn't even want to go there. I want people to find it out for themselves.
But in any case, John Irving, when he was talking to a bunch of would-be writers one time, said that the first thing he does with a book is write the last line of that book. And I heard that and I just went, you know, like that. Because to me, that's kind of like spoiling the fun. I like to start with a little bit of an idea, you know, they come from different places. Sometimes they stick around and you want to do something, sometimes they don't. But the idea is to start with something and just start to go with it, you know. And that's the joy of finding things out, of having characters that just sort of walk on and become a big part of the story. I feel like you have to follow the characters and you have to follow the story where it leads. And the last thing that I want to do is to spoil a book with plot. So, you know, I think that plot is the last resort of bad writers, as a rule. I'm a lot more interested in character and situation, and you follow it where it goes. And so anyway, I had no idea that Tad was going to die, and I had no idea that Danny and his mother were going to live, but I was really glad when they did. People will say, do you keep a notebook? And the answer is, I think a writer's notebook is the best way in the world to immortalize bad ideas. My idea about a good idea is one that sticks around and sticks around and sticks around. It's like, to me, it's like if you were to put breadcrumbs in a strainer and shake it, which is what the passage of time is for me. It's like shaking a strainer. All this stuff that's not very big and not very important just kind of dissolves and falls out. But the good stuff stays. You know, the big pieces stay. I had the idea for Under the Dome when I was teaching high school back in 1973, and it was just too big for me, and I was too young for it. And I wrote about 25, 26 pages and put it away. There's a scene at the beginning of this book where this woodchuck gets cut in half when this dome comes down over this town. I had written that part when I was in my early 20s and just sort of recreated it from memory when I wrote the book. So the good stuff stays.
So does that mean that writing can be taught, can be learned?
It can be learned, but I'm not sure it can be taught. It's a self-taught kind of thing. I think the best writers are voracious readers who pick up the cadences and the feel of narration through a number of different books, and you begin by maybe copying the style of writers that really knocked you out. Mm-hmm. I mean, as a teenager, I read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, so I wrote like H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah. And in my 20s, I read a lot of Ross MacDonald and Raymond Chandler, so I wrote like those guys. But little by little, you develop your own style. I have a routine because I think that writing is self-hypnosis, and you fall into a kind of a trance if you do the same passes over and over. So I'll get up, have some breakfast with my wife, watch CNN, and then I'll make my pot of tea and sit down and write for about 3.5 hours. I started with short stories when I was 18, sold my first one when I was about 20, and produced pretty much nothing but, well, I wrote a couple of novels, but they were not accepted, and a lot of them were so bad that I didn't even bother to revise them. But the short stories were making money, and I got very comfortable with that format, and I've never wanted to leave it completely behind.
You hear some people who write short stories talk about the fact that in their mind they have these massive novels written about these characters, but really what you see on the page is just a sliver of a story that's in their brain that they could tell. They could write a novel about it in most cases. Is that true?
It is true, and what happens to me a lot of times is I will start out saying this would be a terrific short story idea, and it balloons and becomes a novel. Misery started as a short story, and Gerald's Game started as a short story. Those were things that I thought would be small and grew to a size where they would be a novel. For a long time, I felt like movies were a lesser medium because it's like skating. It's all on the surface. Every now and then, some movie will be reduced to doing a voiceover, you know, where this character is talking, and I just kind of go,
to get the interior life.
Yeah, and I just kind of go, no, you've clearly mistaken this medium for something that it's not. But I came to realize that films have a language of their own, and you have to learn that language, and it isn't enough to say, well, I've watched movies my whole life. You have to write a couple. I started, I think I was probably, I'd been writing novels full-time for about 1.5 years, and I thought to myself, I want to learn how to write movies. I want to try it anyway. So I got a book that was about writing screenplays, and I read it. But at the end, it had a sample screenplay from The Twilight Zone that showed me what the form was, and that was something real that I could. So I took the Ray Bradbury book, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I wrote a screenplay, and I learned what I was doing. It wasn't for anybody but me. And then a little while later, I wrote a book called The Shining, and it was my third book, and I got contractual rights to write the first draft screenplay for that. And I did do that, and I found out later that Stanley Kubrick, who had
got the rights through Warner Brothers, had already determined that he and a lady named Diane Johnson were going to do the screenplay for The Shining. So they basically, my screenplay went in and they said, no, this won't do, and then they went on to what they really wanted to do, which was fine. I wasn't angry or upset. You're not. After a while, you get thousands of rejection slips before you break through. You kind of get used to that, and it's just part of the game. But the thing is, you learn. You learn little by little. So,
do you release books differently now than you used to? In that, like, do you have a different definition of what a successful book is, or on the eve of a book's release, do you pay a special kind of attention to how it will be received or how it's being reviewed?
I think that if you spend too much time worrying about what the audience is going to like, that they're not going to like anything that you do. I just look for ideas that I really enjoy, something that I really want to live with for a while, like the story about the people under the dome. Mm-hmm. And I get into it most of the time, and then I just have a ball. I never finished a book and felt like I'm glad that's done. I usually finish a book and say, geez, I don't want to say goodbye to these people. Mm-hmm. And if the people who read it feel the same way, then I'm really happy.
Look, you know, a lot of these interviews, the question that's the worst is people will say, where do you get your ideas? I don't know where I get them. You know, and if I did, man, would I tell you? I mean, Jesus, they've been good to me. All I know is that I sit down and I turn on the machine, and there's always that first 10 minutes that's like smelling a dead fish or walking into a monkey house. And then something will click a little tiny bit, and that leads to something else. And it's like choo, 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 until it's going faster and faster. And then you hit this kind of escape velocity. You're gone. The world, the normal, mundane, sort of stupid world where you got to do the breakfast dishes and you got to make the beds, you know, and you got to worry about getting the kid to the dentist. All that's gone. But there's a place where you have to walk away from it because it's so kind of addictive that otherwise you might just sit there and skip meals and just be lost in that world. And you wouldn't want to do that because that's sort of the way crazy people are in institutions. You know what I'm saying?